A number of global bodies, including the WHO, have raised concerns over long COVID-19. New modeling from the University of Washington School of Medicine shows that nearly 145 million people globally suffered from one of the three symptom clusters of long COVID. That's either fatigue with body pain and mood swings, cognitive problems or shortness of breath. Wits critical care Professor Guy Richards joins me now for more. Good evening, Professor Richards. A pleasure to have you with us tonight. The symptoms of long COVID have long been spoken about. What is the significance of this study?
Well, I think it's just putting into a clearer picture the numbers of people who actually are affected by this condition. So it gives us an idea of potential impacts on the labor force when people try to or wish to return to work. Many of them are not going to be able to because of significant abnormalities, either because of measurable abnormalities like lung function deterioration related to the disease affecting the lungs themselves, cognitive dysfunction with decreased mental acuity and also psychiatric abnormalities, and fatigue, which are really the biggest factors that would impact upon people being able to work. And this gives us an idea of how many are going to be affected or are already affected.
It's really such an important point because what one sees is that often when one has recovered from COVID and those that are living with long COVID, there seems to be an expectation, especially within a professional workplace, that it's not as serious. So people should really just get on with the job. And this study, of course, tells us that it might not be so easy.
No, that's true. And in fact, that is one of the major problems in terms of those people who actually have long COVID. And that's someone to validate their actual symptoms. Because unless you're one of those people that's got direct damage to your lungs or direct damage to your heart, which you can measure, for example, then it's very difficult to actually make a score or to record the extent of disability that you actually have. And then to have people say, well, there's nothing wrong with you, snap out of it, get better, come and work, etc., can be very discouraging and actually increase the potential for severe depression.
One of the things and the aims of this study, as far as I can tell, Professor Richards, is not just to create this awareness, but hopefully lead to some form of solidarity, support for people who are still struggling with long COVID?
Well, I think that is correct, and that's exactly what I'm saying, that once you actually can record the numbers of people who actually have this condition of one type or another, then you can see as an individual who's suffering from it that you're not alone and that there are actually numbers of other people that are similarly afflicted. Very much like having a support group, which is important in this type of condition, that people who have a similar condition would be able to get together and share their experiences, which is very important both in terms of recovery and also in terms of mental health.
Is there low-hanging fruit in terms of interventions that can be brought on board, especially for those in a professional environment where decisions around whether you work in the office, work from home, are things that have to be justified?
Well, I think that from a work point of view, where possible, if people could work from home, that might certainly help. But if you're asking in terms of low-hanging fruit as far as the therapy is concerned, well, that's a bit more difficult because we don't really have a good handle on the causes. We do know, for example, that people who are unvaccinated and then have COVID are much more likely to get long COVID. We also know that if you do vaccinate after you've had long COVID, that can also be a therapeutic intervention and actually decrease the numbers of people that are actually afflicted. So vaccination, all in all, is critical in terms of reducing the number of people who have this condition.
Are
then there are... sorry.
Go ahead, Professor Richards.
No, I was just going to say that there are other medications that can help with tiredness, and there are also other medications that can help to increase molecules that are important for energy, like NAD+, things like nicotinic acid, etc., may have benefit. But at this point, we don't really have a handle on the actual etiology.
Are there distinguishable features or symptoms between long COVID and other illnesses? So again, it speaks to part of what you've been saying, that yes, this research very much validates what people have been going through, but how do they get then that prognosis that this is in fact long COVID and not something else?
Well, the multiplicity of symptoms, I think, are the one thing that actually helps to differentiate it from other illnesses. And it can manifest as other illnesses. As I mentioned, for example, things like depression or psychiatric illnesses could manifest as de novo psychiatric illnesses rather than being due to long COVID. So there's a lot of overlap between various illnesses in terms of this and all of the other symptoms that you potentially actually have. So I think that the temporal relationship to the onset of symptoms is probably one of the most important things, and thereafter the multiplicity of symptoms that people actually have then help to identify that this is specifically related to COVID rather than being some other illness the person might be suffering from.
Is there duration for how long COVID lasts?
Well, we don't yet have a long enough time to say how long it's going to be before people recover. So certainly as many as 30% of people who've had COVID will still have it 6 to 9 months after they've actually had COVID. But then there is a decline in the number that occurs with time. But some people have already had symptoms of long COVID for well over a year.
Let's leave it there for tonight. Professor Guy Richards is with Wits Critical Care. Let me thank you for your time tonight.